Hello and welcome to my series of Canadian humor. This week I'm reading from Stuart McLean's The Vinyl Cafe Notebooks. This was published in this was published in 2010, and it's dedicated for CBC Radio for giving me a place to do what I love. So for those who may not be familiar with Stuart McLean or his Vinyl Cafe, yes, he did have a radio program where he read his stories. If you've been watching some of my Canadian humor videos, I've read a couple of his Dave and Morley stories. He also has a channel on YouTube. Stuart McLean sadly did pass away a number of years ago, but his content is still up on YouTube, and you can hear the master tell his own stories because I do the best I can reading them, but comedy, of course, has a certain timing, and he was indeed the master of that with the various stories that he shares. We also have a collection of the Vinyl Cafe on CD, and I just love hearing them. I just noticed as I open this up that this is actually a traveling book. See where it's been, follow where it goes, and go figure. I bought this at the local thrift store, so I guess whoever had it last donated it. Interesting. Guess I'll have to decide if after I read it, I send it somewhere else. Let me know if you've ever found a traveling book. That's the first I've ever come across it. Let me know if you've ever had a traveling book. This is the first time I've ever come across that. The story that I want to read today is Maple Syrup Time. This starts on page 69 since we're in March, and this will be up after spring equinox, so we're definitely into the time of year when many people have been working at making maple syrup. Yes, I'm from Canada, so maple syrup up here is a very big thing. But a lot of people don't know what it takes to produce that particular product. So here we go. All this week, when Glenn Hodgins gets up in the morning, he's put on a pair of jeans, and then, before he heads outside, he's put on another pair of jeans over the first pair. Glenn has a maple bush in Hemmingford, Quebec. March is sugaring season. Hemmingford is 48 kilometers south of Montreal and was at the epicenter of the Great Ice Storm of 1998. Glenn lost hundreds of maple trees in the storm, and this changed the ecology of his sugar bush. And yes, I do remember that ice storm. It was very bad. There were lots of broken trees. I'm pretty sure that's the year that one of our huge trees in the back came crashing down. And yeah, it was a very scary time for a lot of reasons. I mean, we get ice storms up here, but certainly nothing like we had back then where trees were just literally covered and falling down and power lines down. So I imagine that would have done quite a bit of damage to a sugar bush. The canopy, he says, is thinner than it used to be, which means more light reaches the ground. That's good news if you have a hawthorn or a thimbleberry, but bad news if your job happens to be tapping maples. The thimbleberry bushes, says Glenn, are about 7 feet high this year. That's 7 feet of thorns. Glenn says walking through them is painful even when you're wearing 2 pairs of jeans. They cut the jeans to shreds, he says. To protect his hands, Glenn has to wear thick leather gloves even on warm days. There have been so many warm days this winter that some of Glenn's neighbors have been sugaring through January and February. One neighbor boiled 1,200 gallons of syrup last month, says Glenn. Glenn is a traditionalist. Glenn sugars by the calendar, and that means the first 3 weeks of March. So Glenn has been spending the last week fighting through the thimbleberries with a battery strapped on his back, wearing a drill in a holster, with his pockets full of tools and splices, cutters, and hose clamps. Glenn gathered his sap in buckets until 12 years ago, which made him one of the last of the old-time producers. He swore he'd never switch to the vacuum tubing, but he saw the light in 1990. The buckets were just too much work, he says. Besides, driving a tractor through the bush wasn't good for the trees. With the tubes, Glenn does everything on foot, which is a lot easier on the tree roots and on Glenn too, if it wasn't for the thimbleberries. My hands are completely scratched, and I have scratches on my nose and chin, he says. Glenn started tapping last weekend. Every time he drills into a tree to insert a spout, Glenn gets to do something not many people can do. He gets to peer backwards through time. With every hole he drills, he can see the growth rings in the creamy sap wood back through 2000 and 1999, back into 1998. He says from what he can see, the trees didn't have their crowns mowed off by the ice storm, which went through his bush like a lawnmower seem to have been doing well over the past 4 years. The light that's encouraging the thimbleberries is also shining on the surviving trees. The bush, says Glenn, is slowly recovering. What Glenn and everyone else who's making maple syrup wants at this time of the year are warm days followed by cold nights. When that happens, the sap starts running up and down the sapwood and can be tapped on the way down. The magic, the happy alchemy, transpires in Glenn's sugar shack. In a few short hours, he boils the cold, clear sap down until it turns into golden syrup. The tang of wood smoke from the firebox mixes with the sweet-smelling steam that bellows out of the evaporator. The cheery aroma gets into everything. A sugar shack, writes R.D. Lawrence in his book Maple Syrup, is like a steam bath built inside the heart of a volcano. Glenn says that after you've stayed up a few nights tending to the evaporator, you can almost imagine the trees breathing in and out as the sugar water runs up and down under the bark. These days, when all the smoke and fire you see on the television news comes from high-altitude bombs, and the sweet talk from generals in uniform and politicians with pointers, it's good to remember that there's a mud time close to home where the pool of decay underfoot is the wonderful smell of the earth waking up and the trees coming to life. That was the 10th of March, 2002. That was the 10th of March, 2002. I've included some images of making maple sugar. It is quite a long process. It's a huge treat. You can have maple sugar flavored candies, cookies, of course, the syrup we use on pancakes. I like it on sausages. In fact, that's the only way I like eating sausages. They have to be covered in maple syrup. Let me know down below. Have you ever had maple syrup? Do you enjoy the taste of maple? And until next time, remember, laughter is. Until next time, remember, nature definitely helps to nourish the soul, provides us with so many wonderful things, and of course, keeps us grounded. Take good care.